form of the 2019-2020 YLD election cycle. My name is Jamie Davis, and I am the current YLD speaker and chair of the Elections Committee. Now, the Elections Committee is charged with administering the YLD elections. So in addition to myself, the other members of the Elections Committee include former YLD speaker Dave Scriven-Young, Chair Logan Murphy, Chair-elect Chris Brown, and Secretary Troy Portis. Now, the Saturday morning of the virtual 2020 YLD annual meeting, the Assembly delegates will elect a YLD secretary, a YLD clerk, a YLD treasurer, YLD representative to the House of Delegates, YLD representative to the nominating committee, and a YLD representative to the Board of Governors. Now, the slate of candidates are final, and they have been final since the adjournment of the Assembly at the 2020 mid-year meeting in Austin, Texas. Now, the offices with uncontested candidates are as follows. YLD nominee to the Board of Governors, Jamie Davis, Florida. House of Delegates representative, Asa Madan from California. Nominating committee representative, Tommy Preston from South Carolina. The offices with contested candidates are as follows. Secretary, Joe Bahn, DC. Jerome Crawford, Michigan. For Assembly Clerk, Abre Conner, California. Peter Handy, Nevada. For Treasurer, Kareem Aref from California, and Brandon Lee Wolff from New Jersey. As noted previously, the only contested elections are for the races of YLD Secretary, YLD Treasurer, and YLD Clerk. Now, this form will focus on the contested elections. However, I encourage everyone to reach out to those 3 remaining candidates of the uncontested elections to hear about the exciting things that they have planned for their own tenure. Now, this form is very similar to the form that we had in Austin. It'll be divided in 3 parts. The first part will focus on the race to elect the YLD Secretary. The second part will focus on the race to elect the YLD Treasurer, and the third part will focus on the race to elect YLD Clerk. Now, the format for these forms will be as follows. Now, each candidate, they'll be given 2 minutes for opening statement. Then I will ask the candidates a few questions, and then the audience will be able to ask if time permits. And the candidates, of course, will then have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Now, audience members, if you are wishing to ask questions, please submit them to me in the chat box. Submit it to me privately so I can go through as I'm moderating and ask the questions that I'm not already have down for myself. Now, I am asking all audience members to please go ahead and take your video off so that we can only see the YLD candidates. So right now I'm asking for everyone to mute their lines and please take all their video down now. Okay, thank you. So let's begin with YLD Secretary. We will start with Joe Bahn, who won the coin toss. You each have 2 minutes for your opening statement. You can go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, and thank you for joining us on a Friday evening or in a rebroadcast. My name is Joe Bahn, and I'm a candidate for YLD Secretary. I'm a fraud and consumer protection attorney at the FDIC in Washington, D.C., where I focus on making consumers whole and keeping the banking system a little bit safer. I'm excited tonight about the opportunity to share my goals and vision for the YLD with you. I've been fortunate to have almost every leadership role in the YLD, from emerging leader, scholar, to committee chair, vice director of a team, and serving 2 terms on council and cabinet, 1 running a national initiative, and most recently as affiliates director, where I've had the opportunity to work with our 300 plus affiliates from across the country. From that experience, and with conversations that I've had with current and former YLD leaders over the last 10 years, I've developed a 6-point plan that can be accomplished, but that still allows me the opportunity to be nimble, to be responsive in uncertain times. The practice of law and the employment landscape are constantly evolving, but by improving on-demand content for young lawyers and law students, expanding affiliate spotlights to foster cross-collaboration, advocating for policy that benefits young lawyers and law students or the practice of law, focusing on diversities in new ways that we haven't yet, remaining the service arm of the ABA, and helping young lawyers and law students navigate to the substantive sections, divisions, and forms of the ABA when they're ready to age out of the YLD or take on a new leadership role can do so much. I hope you'll join me and support my campaign as secretary. Here we go.
Thank you, Joe. Next candidate, Jerome Crawford. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join despite everything that's going on, especially on a Friday night. I'm Jerome Crawford, Senior Corporate Counsel, Model Industries Incorporated. All of my info you can find on my website, which is jc4yld.com, the number 4. Quick question, what's your why? Now, I ask you to think about that for a moment because living in the midst of these truly unsettling times has, I suspect, illuminated what's really important for you more than ever before. Family, friends, loved ones, health, basic resources, quality time with others, and sure, Netflix too. But back to the why. You've all heard me echo this theme dozens of times if I had a chance to speak to you before, seeing materials. Remember the why and the how will come. However, as I've often said before, I didn't choose it because it's campy or catchy. I chose it because it's real to me and I believe to you. The unprecedented circumstances we face today mean that our tomorrow's forever changed. The world, the legal profession, of course, bar service organizations. The power of a why is incredible, and we know that. So it allows us to push through these challenges, persevere in tough times, and rise up after being rocked. My why? It's a personal sense of duty and purpose. To whom much is given, much is required. As I seek this role to honor to lead this great division, it centers around one fundamental notion that's very personal for me, and that's pipeline. Particularly now, it's critical that we fortify and strengthen the pipeline, from law students to young lawyers to grow into seasoned vets. Another axiom I love is to lift as you climb. 2 components to that: to pull those up coming behind you and lay that groundwork, and to create a path and assist those who are similarly situated along the journey. Over the next several minutes, I hope to better explain this proverbial why and how they connect. But simply put, it's espousing the climb. Collaborate, learn, innovate, motivate, and build. In this climate, it's more important than ever before to implement a principles-based approach. Specific programming matters, and projects matter, but this theme will help us maneuver and be nimble for whatever comes our way. The next steps are pretty uncertain, but one thing is for sure: we'll get through this together. I look forward to continuing this discussion and await your feedback, questions, and insights. Thank you for your time, attention, and consideration.
Thank you, Jerome. Next, we will move on to the questions, and we will start with Joe. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. Since it is Mental Health Month, how do you intend to balance the position with your personal and professional lives to ensure you are mentally and physically well? Have you thought about that, and how will you do that, especially during these unprecedented times where this is not the norm?
Thank you for that question, Jamie. I had spent a few weeks deciding last summer whether or not this was a role that could fit with me and my family. I have a 1-year-old daughter who's fantastic, and I have a fairly vibrant law practice and pro bono practice, and whether or not this fit in with that. I think that I've made strides in my own personal life. I have a great partner who is willing to share the load and make sure that I succeed in the goals that I have. And there's great resources out there. The Texas Bar blog just put out a fantastic article on what to do to keep wellness a priority in these uncertain times. So, it's as simple as making sure that I get my workout in, but as important as making sure that we're advancing the profession. We're all here for that reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here on a Friday evening during these times.
Thank you. Jerome, have you thought about how you will do that?
I thought about it because I think about it every day. A quick account, I noticed that I am the original baby of my family, but I have 4 younger adopted siblings. I and my older brother, were out of the house. My parents empty nesters, and they decided to adopt. So I've got siblings that were adopted at 3, 5, 6, and 7, and now all in college except for one in high school. All have suffered severe mental health challenges. So I think my everyday walk is one that encompasses mental health. I also applaud our current chair, Logan Murphy. He made a point to talk about his struggles with mental health, because the more we illuminate it and make it real, the more we can help deal with those issues. So through my work as the co-chair of the Men of Color Project this year, we've done quite a bit on mental health. In fact, we have a program coming up about destigmatizing those mental health issues. And so it's something that I make sure that I have my balance. I do what I can, and you can't get it all in one day. So it's important that we talk about it, speak about it, remove the stigma, and know that we're all dealing with this together.
Thank you. Now, Jerome, I'm gonna go back to you. How could the division set itself apart with the likely longer term increase in virtual meetings?
That's a great question. If you haven't already invested in Zoom stock, I guess we probably should get that out of the way right now, because all of our virtual meeting platforms are skyrocketing as far as their usage. As far as this division setting itself apart, I think that the Young Lawyers Division has a unique access. We have a unique situation where our members also happen to be some of the most prominent users of social media. So what I'd like us to do more is get out of the Zoom concept and get out of just what you're doing in a webinar concept. Those are great. We'll still use those. But do what we can through maybe an Instagram Live format, maybe a Facebook Live, using other mediums such as your Twitter and things of that nature, to maximize, because this is where our members actually are. Many of us, we grew up in the era where ever get at our respective institutions and universities. So I think it's one way to set us apart. And otherwise, once you have these resources, doing the best we can to promulgate them, make them available, and resurface them. So it's the sharing, the posting, the liking, the things we do every day on our phones.
Thank you. Joe, how could the division set itself apart with the likely longer term increase in virtual meetings?
So I think this is a great question, one that not only affects our budget, but the content that we're pushing out to our members. We have over 300 affiliates across the country that are constantly putting out fantastic information, webinars, content, programming, CLE, pro bono project templates, and toolkits. If we can harness that and foster the cross collaboration, we are the national organization at that point. We are the ones that can connect the Multnomah County Bar Association in Oregon with the Maine New Lawyers section. We're the ones that can make sure that we are providing the content that our members need where they are. So it's not just about making sure that our programs transition well online, which I'm sure we're going to have a great spring conference next month in June, because it is already May. In June, we're going to have a great spring conference, and that's going to kind of set us up, really tee us up and head us in the right direction. I think that both Tommy and Logan this year, and I'm sure Chris Brown next year with Legal Innovation Director, is really going to look to that person to kind of help us really move in that direction.
Thank you. Joe, I'm going to go ahead and just stick with you on this one as I toggle back and forth. If a young lawyer came to you with a proposed idea for a platform, for your platform, how would you evaluate that idea and if it's worth implementing?
That's a great question, and it's a conversation that I've had over the last 9 months with young lawyers from across the country. My platform is solely developed on conversations that I had with folks that were in leadership in the YLD currently, in the past, and leaders from across the country. There are so many important issues that are happening on the ground. It doesn't matter where people are located. So for me, it's about evaluating, see if we can tangibly get it done, see what the potential cost outlays are, see what the policy potential policy hiccups that we might have that we need to overcome. So if we do a full evaluation, we can bring in a new leader who's excited about something into the ABA fold to increase our reach, but also to make sure that what that leader probably is bringing to us might affect other leaders across the country, and law students as well as young lawyers.
Thank you. Jerome? Same question. If a young lawyer came up to you with a proposed idea for your platform, how would you decide for evaluating and if it's worth implementing?
Thanks, Jamie. Great question. So when you kind of compare an idea to quote my platform, and I often say this, that it's not about me and about what I think and sort of thing. This platform, so to speak, or what you say my theme is, it's developed from a variety of conversations, just as my counterparts Joe said, and having with young lawyers all across the country, but also what I've learned over the years, that these thematic approaches are what help you maneuver. And I think what we're dealing with this pandemic right now is teaching a lot about maneuverability. It's very important that we be nimble. So one of the most important things I'll look at if a program is brought to me is continuity. Whoever is granted the opportunity to serve in this role as secretary and ultimately chair of the division, it's a very short period of time. Anyone that's served in before says it goes by like that. So it's looking about not just what can you accomplish in quote my year or whatever the years of that person, but what's going to help build upon the foundation of what's come before us and help us innovate and change and make us a better organization for the future. So I've looked at the continuity and that broad impact of any idea that's brought.
Thank you. Jerome? Some people in the division say that the culture of the division has changed and changed for the worse. Some young lawyers are no longer excited or engaged to attend and participate. What do you think, and how would you mitigate those concerns or change the situation?
It's a great question. The first thing, listen to them. I think through the surveys the ABA has begun to conduct in the past few years, and now we're in the process of evaluating that data. That's why we've changed our membership model, pricing, things of that nature. Listen, when people tell you that they're disgruntled or they don't like it, don't take it as a one-off comment. That's the first thing we have to do. Listen, pay attention. And then when we get that feedback, think about, and one thing I've shared before in previous candidates forums or one-on-one conversations or group settings is part of the reason anybody chose to even not release a public supporters list, for instance, was because division and dissension are two words that I've heard. Ironically, the young lawyers division, but the problem is that we've been divided. And it's okay to have opposite opinions. It's okay to advocate for different things. So I think we have to do our best to try to isolate that spirit of that negativity, spirit of dissension, because as I commonly say, no one's getting paid for this. We do this because we love it, because we care, because each of us have an individual why that brings us back, as do all our members. Help listen to them, find their why, and help them re-engage.
Thank you. Joe, what do you think? How would you mitigate those concerns or try to change the situation?
I think it's important that we bring people back into the fold. And so our survey data has shown that our members want skills-based programs and learning opportunities. They want leadership roles. So we need to focus and make sure that we're giving them in the exact topic areas that they're looking for. So it's business, it's litigation, it's employment law. That's where our members are. And so if we're going to be the premier organization that provides not only the content, but the opportunities to succeed and move forward, we have to constantly be bringing people into the fold or back into the fold and giving them a springboard into new leadership opportunity. So my sixth part of my platform is to develop an online platform that would allow folks to put in their interest areas, and it would populate all the opportunities that are available to them. So if it's an employment attorney, they could see that the age cap for the labor and employment law fellowship is actually 40 years old, and they'd likely qualify to apply to that. If we're giving our members this opportunity, then they can grow and come back to us.
Thank you, Joe. Now, Joe, if elected, what steps would you take within your term as secretary to immediately bring change?
It's an interesting question because it's asking you immediately, but 3 years from now. So I'll try and answer this as best I can. I think that you really need to pay attention during your secretary and chair-elect year so that you're learning from the people that are coming before you. And not just stopping there, but reaching out to past chairs and making sure that you know what's coming. I bet if you called Logan right now, he would say that he didn't expect that the last 6 months of his chair year would look like it is. So I'd bring change by making sure I'm paying attention at the front set, by implementing these 6 pieces of my platform that I've talked with hundreds of leaders from across the country to develop, but also to make sure that we're bringing people new into the fold. So it's going to be hopefully an immediate gut punch of 6 things that we get done, but the opportunity to then focus on new areas, burgeoning areas of the law, or of what our practice areas and things like that look like.
Thank you. Jerome, what immediate changes would you bring as secretary? if elected?
The immediate change, I think, has to start with the energy that you bring as an individual into the room, and to be a uniter, not a divider. So as Joe said, she took the words out of my mouth, no need to repeat it, that I think you need to pay attention in that secretary and chair-elect year. We talked a lot, and I mentioned a moment about kind of continuity, right? It has to really flow. Everything from, as we mentioned, Tommy, as past chair, and Logan now, and Chris, and whoever goes in this role, and so on and so forth. All the issues that we're facing and trying to do something about and to battle didn't happen in a year. They're not going to be solved in a year, but you can make great strides if you're working together and you have this kind of continuous chain link. So I think about those principles and that thematic approach of climb, right? The collaboration, that spirit of collaboration we bring into the room, making sure we're not overlapping other SDFs that are doing their work within the ABA. What are we learning? And first we learn, and then we see how we can innovate, right? And then we're making sure we're being a motivation to those around us for the community, and that we're build the pipeline. All of us in these roles are temporarily. Let's do what we can to fortify those that are coming behind us.
Thank you. Now, Jerome, student debt is the number one issue from our members, and they're concerned about it. What concrete action or steps would you aim to address this if elected? And this question comes from someone in the audience.
Yeah, great question. And student debt's one that's going to continue to come up. I mean, might as well get that out of the way right now. No, the ABA and the YLD aren't going to pay their student loans off. We know that, right? But because we know it's one of the biggest issues, and we talked about survey data, that was one of the biggest things we saw in our surveys that were conducted in the last few years. I think what we need to do is then find ways to how our programming can have an element that discusses this. Sometimes the element isn't how to solve it, sometimes it's how to cope with it, right? So sometimes you have a program that's doing a lot of anecdotal conversation and discourse. Why aren't we talking about the fact that it's hard, right, for a lot of people to make that payment on a month-to-month basis? Then, of course, you have practical programming. Some we've done at the Men of Color Summit for last year in Washington, D.C. We had one-on-one sessions that were done with the American Bar Endowment as well. People were able to sit down with New York Life and talk about their issues and find solutions. So you can do everything from solution-oriented approaches, which I would recommend we have in as many programs you possibly can, whether virtual and in person. Also do what you can to just help people talk about it and deal with it together, because, again, that's one very huge common denominator.
Thank you. Joe, what concrete actions or steps would you aim to address this concern?
Jerome's right. This is the number one issue for our members, and my plan would probably be twofold. I would look at it from a programmatic perspective. As someone that's enrolled in public service loan forgiveness, I would want us to have a webpage that lists all of the details about the program, about what different income-based repayment plans look like, and information-based, and that we can get out for our members. But second, I think we need to be working with some outside partners to look at policy opportunities. Like, we could work on the Higher Education Act, for example. That's something that we could work to reauthorize. So we can have conversations about new policies like discharging student loan debt in bankruptcy. The ABA has really been a leader in the public service loan forgiveness space, but that's a law or a program that was enacted under President Bush. So that's 2 presidents ago. We really need to be looking more innovative on ways that we could move the student debt conversation forward with something that's a little bit better.
Thank you, Joe. Again, staying with you, what is being very specific, way that current YLD members can engage law students and cultivate their involvement in the YLD? So this is really regarding how can we engage the law students? And this is a question from the audience as well.
Great question. We know that law students actually make up more of our membership than young lawyers do. So it's important that we're bringing law students in the fold. I am the co-chair of the Membership and Marketing Committee for the section of litigation. And one of the ways that we've had success is actually going to law schools and talking about our experience. Everyone on this call and folks that come to conferences or that have leadership roles within the ABA and the YLD have felt like their participation matters and they're moving the profession forward. If we can go and talk on the mountain about what the ABA is and what we've gotten from it to law students in roundtable discussions by fostering mentorship, we can actually bring law students into the ABA to talk about what's important, get the next crop, the new generation of young lawyers in on the ground floor so that someday they'll be talking to you all on a Friday night trying to campaign for a secretary role.
Jerome, how would you engage law students and cultivate their involvement in the YLD?
I think it starts at the top, Jamie. And by that I mean start working with the law students division. So often, and we know this in various leadership roles, that even our numbers, and so you look at the ABA at large and how they're counted, the YLD, there's a lot of intertwining between the law student division and the young lawyers division. I think we have to make it more intentional and continue to do so. We've already seen at the staff level where they've renamed their focus to early career strategies. And so you've got similar staff support and partnership from the law student levels to the young lawyer levels. Let's be honest, all law students will ultimately become us one day, so to speak, right? And they're going to step in these roles, as Joe mentioned a moment ago. I find it imperative that we do it at the top. Once we start at the top, then we can work on programs, things I've talked about with a number of young lawyers in conversations, such as law school toolkits and things like that. Give them practical resources. Men of Color Project, when we first started, we were thinking it'd be just for young lawyers. We initially expanded our focus very quickly to now include not just 1 to 5, but 0 to 5. So in everything we do, think about law students because they'll be in our shoes very quickly.
Thank you. We have a few more questions, and I'm going to leave that to the end because we have all 3 candidates. So if there are additional questions from the audience, I will try to get to them at the end. Candidates, you have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We will start with Joe.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for spending the time with us tonight. I have really enjoyed speaking with so many of you over these last 9 months during the campaign, and I'm looking forward to continuing those conversations. I encourage you to check out my website, joeforYLD.com, that's joeforYLD.com, to get to know me and my vision a little bit better, and to hopefully connect offline. I ask that you consider supporting me, Joe Bahn, for YLD Secretary. Thanks and have a good night.
Thank you. Jerome, you can begin with your closing statement.
As I've once said, in the time of great division, dissension, and disagreement, even as sometimes our division is the question that got raised, I've chosen to be the change I wish to see. Use this candidacy as an example and focus on unifying us under a common driving force, our collective why. So show respect, show grace, show love, whether you're on opposing sides of critical issues or you vehemently disagree. If a statement that gets made offends you or you're mistreated even without reason. The collective challenges we face, particularly today, show us one thing clearly: we have more in common than our proclaimed differences. As you can tell, I'm a person of principles, and Damon Jerome Keefe is a federal circuit judge I admire very much in the U.S. Sixth Circuit. And part of his experience while in law school as being a janitor, a reporter approached him at the Detroit News and told him he should keep mopping instead of studying for the bar examination. That led to one of his most famous quotes, ironically, where he says that each of us are walking on floors that we did not scrub and through doors we did not open. So wherever you go, scrub floors and open doors. Continue to give back and understand that what drives others around you, their why, is equally important to outlining their clear plan, the how. So for the YLD, we've talked about a ton of issues. You can go on my website and see them, jc4yld.com, loan debt, lack employment opportunities, mental health being stigmatized, a ton of things. But not to mention those issues that are going to be created and what we'll have to navigate in the, quote, post-pandemic practice. So I'm confident that with your support, I will be an effective advocate for this division and on your behalf. My continued thoughts and prayers are with you and yours for continued peace, health, and safety. I thank you again for taking time to come to something like this voluntarily when there's so many other things in your world that I'm sure are more important. Don't take it lightly. Please reach out to me. It will give me an opportunity to schedule time with you, as I've really enjoyed having an opportunity to meet with so many of you. My name is Jerome Crawford. I humbly ask for your support and vote to serve as your next American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division Secretary. Let's climb together.
Thank you to our secretary candidates. We appreciate their time. Now, if they can go ahead and take off their video, and we will then allow the treasurer candidates to turn on their video so we can begin the next portion of the candidates forum. Thank you. Team. Brandon?
Yeah, Sarah Stretch, I need you to re-enable my video. or Austin. There we
And Brandon as well.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Is your video on? I don't see you.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we will begin with the YLD candidates for treasurer. Now, the individual who will win this election will serve a 2-year term as treasurer. We will start with Kareem Aref, who won the coin toss. Now, you each will have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Kareem, you will go first.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. It's time for action and accountability. It's time for perspective and planning, not politics. It's time for experience and explanation, not excuses. My name's Kareem Aref. I've met a lot of you. I've been involved in the ABA and the YLD and the Law Student Division for many years. And it's with great honor and to increase our trust, our transparency, that I run to be your next ABA YLD treasurer. Now, I came to run for this position for several reasons, but I think to know where I'm going, you have to know where I've been. And in the past several years, I have chaired divisions. And to my knowledge, I'm one of the only people who can say that they have revamped an entire division and saved the ABA tens of thousands of dollars while still increasing engagement and increasing the use of digital and alternative media sources to get more members involved in a time where our membership has been at an all-time low. I've been a business owner and run multiple businesses, a financial advisor, a private attorney, a public attorney, founded multiple nonprofits, have sat on multiple committees within the YLD, and I'm excited to bring all of my experience to the treasurer position. I come to the treasurer position to try to be your ace in the hole, to be the person who is going to help build accountability for the money that is allocated for the YLD, collaboration with the big ABA and our local bars to increase that funding, and education for our lawyers to be able to use and effectively financially plan with their money. I'm excited to speak with you, and I hope by the end of this, you will join me and support my campaign for YLD treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kareem. Next candidate, Brandon, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Lee Wolff, and I practice commercial litigation at Dade Pitney in New Jersey. I also practice in New York and Florida. I'd like to provide you with a background on my bar involvement. I serve as an executive committee or board member of 3 Young Lawyers divisions, New Jersey, New York, and Florida. And next month, I will be the treasurer of the New York State Bar's Young Lawyer section. Next month, I will also be the treasurer of the Florida Bar's Out-of-State division. And I believe these positions will provide a great background for me to serve as the YLD treasurer. In the ABA, I've been involved as a member of council for several years as a district representative. I also have served as a member of the affiliates assistance team and have been the vice director of the public service team, where I have planned public service outreaches at our conferences. Specifically, I organized the most viewed Facebook Live video at its time regarding the Home Safe Home Initiative at a prior conference. I also planned a unique CLE on child abuse, elder abuse, and mandatory reporting laws with 7 different speakers at our Louisville conference, for which I earned a Star of the Quarter award. I also was involved in the year-long effort to change the definition of what is considered a young lawyer, the definition of the first 10 years of practice. And this made ABA history. I'm also currently working on the Wills for Medical Heroes initiative. Now, outside the YLD, I have been on the Standing Committee on Gun Violence and the Legal Opportunity Scholarship Committee for several years. And in preparation for running for this position, I have spoken to the prior treasurers to better understand the position. And as treasurer, I'd like to focus my efforts on securing new sponsorships, especially as we're moving toward a virtual format for upcoming meetings. I look forward to using my experience in securing sponsorships for an anti-violence organization I founded when I worked on in high school, college, and law school. I'd also like to expand the role of the treasurer so it has a more visible role within the Young Lawyers division. In addition, I look forward to hearing your ideas and concerns about how the treasurer can have a better impact on your role in division. Finally, I believe my leadership roles with 3 state bar associations, plus my multiple year involvement with the ABA YLD makes me a great candidate, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Candidates. We will begin with each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. Kareem, we'll start with you. What do you believe is the role of the treasurer, and what unique qualities would you bring to that role?
Thank you for the question, Jamie. I think the role of the treasurer is one that tends to be overseen. I mean, the truth of the matter is our staff does a lot of the accounting, and the treasurer primarily serves as oversight. I think in the past couple of years, and I know the Long Range Planning Board has been looking at whether the treasurer position is something that needs to be retained. I think the truth is now is a time for innovation in the position. It's a time to make sure that the treasurer is providing financial literacy to the members and focusing on bringing what is there to the forefront as opposed to wasting money. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets, nonprofit organizations. I serve in my local bars and state bar, and I've been on the House of Delegates. I've worked with the highest leadership of ABA, and I'm excited to bring all of those qualifications and those experiences to this position to push forward and build the organization and the treasurer role to an even greater height than has been seen before.
Thank you, Kareem. Brandon, what do you believe the role of treasurer, right? What do you believe that is? And then what unique qualities would you bring to that role?
Well, like I started out in my opening statement, I believe the role of the treasurer has been in flux in recent years, and I think we should get back to what the role of the treasurer is in representing the institution of our Young Lawyers Division and being involved in the budget process. And I believe I have, in addition to serving as an officer for the Young Lawyers Division and being an active, involved member of the officer chair line and the other officers that are involved in the division. And I believe you need to have experience in leadership. And I have that experience, not only with the ABA Young Lawyers Division by serving on council and through being involved in the public service team, but in addition, through my role that I'm going to be soon having as the treasurer of 2 different organizations that I mentioned before. In addition, I was the founder of an anti-violence organization where I manage the finances of that organization as well. So I believe I have a lot of qualifications based on my role within the ABA, other bar associations, and roles outside of the ABA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Brandon, what are your top 3 priorities, if elected, during your term in office?
Well, the first priority is expanding the role of the treasurer position in terms of having it being a more visible position. That's the first thing. The second thing is really revamping and bringing back the finance board, which I understand has not been very active in recent years. And the third thing is really to be an accessible member of the YLD leadership, to hear the concerns from our members and to work with the officers and the staff and with all the members in trying to reach all those goals together.
Thank you. Kareem, what would be your top 3 priorities?
Absolutely. I mentioned it in my opening statement, and I really think being the ace in the hole is the way to do it, and that's accountability first. There is allocated funds to the YLD every year, and the way we use those funds needs to be reassessed. And we need to make sure we're using those in such a way that we can benefit the most members. So the first step is going to be reviewing the money that we currently have to make sure we're using it most efficiently. The second step is collaboration, working with the other entities that are currently funding young lawyers and law students, working with the big ABA, and I've already been in talks with Michelle Banky, the current ABA treasurer, about how we can make sure that our funds continue to come in and continue to increase so we can continue working, doing the good work. And finally, education, which is something different, but I think bringing financial literacy to ABA members is something that we can do to make sure that our members get the most bang for their buck when they're traveling to conferences or setting up their lives. And I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Yeah, if we, everyone, please mute their lines, please. Mute your lines, please. Sorry, Kareem.
If I might just finish that thought, I know my time elapsed.
Go ahead.
So my final thing is education, discussing bringing financial literacy and helping young lawyers who are setting up their lives to know the tricks and tactics of the finance industry.
Thank you. Now, Kareem, I'm just going to stick with you on this one. What do you see as the division's major budgetary challenges, right, in the future, and how can it be resolved?
I think the budgetary challenges, and I spoke briefly with Michelle Banky about this, the budgetary challenges are making sure that our association is using the money efficiently. I think we are constantly in an argument of what is versus what could be, and too often we're not looking at what could be and how we can use those funds. Now, as a general fund entity, we have to make sure that we're not only trying to use our money efficiently, but we have to warrant the money that we're getting to make sure that we can continue to increase our budget. I think working with the big ABA is the way to do that. So not only do we turn around and show that we can do more work than any entity in the ABA on a smaller budget, but when we increase our budget, we can also create more on the ground change and more effect for our members than any other division. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, is looking to what could be as opposed to settling for what currently is.
Thank you. Brandon, what do you see as the division's major budgetary challenge, and how can it be resolved?
Well, I agree with Kareem that using the money is one of the biggest challenges. And I also think, looking at some of the funds that what we spend our money on currently is something that we need to take a hard look at, and it may not be the most popular thing, but just taking a look at things like printing costs and shipping costs for magazines, and is just one example. But there are some things that we just need to take a look at and see if that's really the most efficient thing. But going into the future, I think one of the it's an unfortunate challenge, but some of the time that we could be saving some money as a result of the spring conference and our future annual meeting, and seeing how that can be allocated better in future years. And the use of our virtual spring conference and virtual conferences in the future could help resolve some of those challenges.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon.
There we go. Now, Brandon, as you are aware, earlier you mentioned some of your ideas to kind of generate revenue, but what is the most wasteful expense in the division's operating budget now? And what would you do to address that problem in office?
Well, one of the things was that I kind of just made a reference to is the shipping and printing costs, which I think is something that I know I understand there's been a conversation in the past. And I understand that the real need for our members who don't come to conferences to have a tangible object, but we need to look at that and see that if something like that is coming up with 30% of our budget, we need to see if there's if it's appropriate to have a conversation about moving something like that to an online format, or other ways of trying to save money, so something like shipping and printing costs isn't taking up 30% of our budget. So that's just one example that I'd like to offer. But also, before I conclude, I'd like to say that that's something that wouldn't just be a drastic or immediate change, but it's something that just start the conversation.
Thank you. Kareem, what is the most...
In terms of, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think what we really need to look at is how we're measuring wasteful. And I think wasteful is not what affects the members at large. In terms of the Young Lawyer magazine, I think what wasteful is the way in which we allocate our travel funds. I think there is an issue when we have our ABA executives staying at the same hotels as the Board of Governors, because that's the ritzy hotel, and we're paying double the cost we could be paying for one person in a room than having roommates staying at a hotel that is a little bit cheaper just so we can get out from the main hotel. I think we really need to take a hard look and say, what is it that we're prioritizing? Is it our members or is it our leadership? And I think when we look at the budget, the way to do that is to prioritize our members, to make sure that we're making smart decisions as an association and helping our members make smart decisions as individuals, so that we can make sure that our money as young lawyers goes farther and faster than the other associations. We don't need to deal with what we've been dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question from the audience. How has your platform, vision, theme really been adapted or changed during some discussions that you've had with young lawyers across the country? and also as a result of some of the experiences that you've experienced with during this time in the pandemic?
It's to me, right?
Yes, sorry, Kareem.
No problem. Just wanted to confirm. I think my platform was first created from talking to other people, from having chaired a division, from working in various groups, both in the YLD and on the House of Delegates, is creating this idea of using our money the right way, getting the resources that we need to continue to expand what we're doing, and building that education. Talking to other young lawyers, there's an obvious importance in building our ability to make our dollars go faster. And to a certain extent, online meetings and online discussions are a great way of doing that. And that's how we expanded membership engagement in the law student division when I was there, and saved the division tens of thousands of dollars by switching to online formats in a lot of cases. I think we don't want to run that too far though, because what a lot of ABA members want is that interpersonal connection. The ability to go and see their friends and work and network nationwide, I think, is one of the most valuable resources that the YLD can have. Thank you.
Brandon, how has your platform changed or evolved with your discussions with young lawyers or unprecedented?
Yeah, so my platform and initiatives has really been shaped so far by talking to the prior treasurers who held this position. There have only been 3, and I spoke to Christina, Day, and Mark, and their conversations and their candid conversations and honest feedback about what their goals were, what they achieved, what they still think could be done, were very enlightening. And in addition, I have spoken to other members, and I still plan to do so even more. It's been a little unfortunate in recent weeks because the focus, I didn't want to reach out to too many people during the COVID crisis. But as we come into the coming weeks, I look forward to talking to more members of our division to really get their input as well, beyond the ones I've spoken to and the 3 past ABA YLD treasurers.
Thank you. Brandon, I'm going to go ahead and stick with you. This is a question from the audience. Since the candidates are running for treasurer, do they really understand or know the largest revenue generator? Who is the largest revenue generator for the YLD? So do you know what is the largest generating revenue for the YLD?
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that I've learned in this process and looking at the budget is that we aren't a revenue generating division. We're not one of the divisions or sections that is a revenue generating division. But some of the things like dues and our meeting expenses, our registration cost is one of the things that brings in revenue. So that is my knowledge. But that is, something that we need to look into changing. And another thing that I didn't mention, which is another big revenue generator, is sponsorships. And that's something that I'm focused on going forward, and trying to bring new and innovative sponsor opportunities to the Young Lawyers Division, especially as we go to a virtual format for our spring meeting, our annual meeting, and perhaps even further than that. There is an opportunity to look and cultivate new sponsors, which could definitely add to the important revenue generating function of sponsorships in our YLD budget.
Thank you. Kareem, can you answer, do you know the largest revenue generator for the YLD?
Well, I think Brandon actually hit that one on the head. The YLD doesn't generate revenue in that way. We're funded based on the general fund, so the ABA allocates dues. It's why the YLD, or allocates funds. It's why the YLD doesn't charge dues specifically, whereas other sections and divisions would. The thing we need to look at here is, where is the money coming in and where is it going out? And conferences tend not to be revenue generating. We lose money on conferences. We sell ad space when it comes to the TYL, and we actually put in a lot of work in terms of revenue generation and bringing money in. But that's the key here, is really understanding that play with the ABA and the fact that our funds that we're allowed to allocate come from the ABA, and taking steps to work with the big ABA, make sure that we're able to increase those numbers and use them efficiently so that we can continue to do the good work that we've been doing.
Thank you. Now, Kareem, back to you. Do you know, or what do you view as the function of the Finance Board? And would you advocate to retain it if elected? And this is a question from the audience.
I think the Finance Board is really designed as a sounding board. It's designed to have a place and a group that gets to discuss and critically assess the different values that we're putting our money towards. I think what's important and going to be important in the coming years is to really work with the long-range planning board and talk to those individuals who are already in the trenches on what the priorities of the organization are and how we can best fund that. That's an organization that I worked with as the former chair of the law student division. That I held a position on that board. And we discussed what worked and what didn't, and found that programs that were in existence just weren't proper, and we're able to push towards other programs that were better use of our money. So I think using that group is going to be important. I think if people want to be involved in the budget process, a big part of my platform is going to be bringing as many people to the table as possible to ensure that the conversation is thorough while still using the resources that we have.
Brandon?
Yeah, so I would agree with Kareem with this regarding the Finance Board. In my conversations, I understand that the Finance Board was pretty inactive in the last year or two. But before that, in talking to Mark and Christina, they shared how they did have a robust Finance Board, and they did have it as a sounding board for them as treasurer to discuss important issues that affected the division. They talked about the experience that they had discussing potential changes to reimbursements, ideas about having a sign-in, and just in general, talking about sponsorship, cultivating sponsors. So I think it's definitely a great idea to retain and advocate. I certainly would advocate to retain the Finance Board. So I'm not just doing this role as alone, that I have a board and a team, essentially, of members working with me to advocate for issues that affect the division's finances. So I would definitely want to have a strong Finance Board, and I would advocate for that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, you have 2 minutes for closing statements. Again, for those that have more questions for the candidates, please send them to me, and we will try to get to them at the end of the forum. So we will go ahead and start with Kareem for your 2-minute closing statement.
I'm running for treasurer on the basis of truth, trust, and transparency. The YLD is a place where we're supposed to come to not only become better attorneys, but to give back to the community and build towards something better. And the way we do that is making sure that the resources that we have are properly allocated, assessing what we have and what we can do, building collaboration with other organizations, because ultimately that's where our members are going to go, and making sure that we educate our members, not only on their own personal finances and how they can work with the ABA-YLD, but on how the association works. It's time that we start pushing so that the Young Lawyers Division isn't the kiddie table, but we're at the head of the ABA when we're discussing policy choices and implementing changes that are going to affect lawyers across the country. I believe the treasurer role is essential in making sure that our organization runs efficiently and that we have the funds and the ability to do the great work that we've been doing. I want to bring my experience as a business owner, a nonprofit founder, a former division chair, an active member in the ABA, and lifetime advocate to work with the YLD to make sure that we can attain the great heights that we can set for themselves and stop limiting ourselves to the idea of we're the Young Lawyers Division, we don't have to do anything beyond this until we get to the big ABA. It's time that we step up. It's time that we put our money where our mouth is. It's time that we work for change. What I want to do is work with actions and accountability, because I'm going to be here for you. I want to work with perspective and planning and not play politics. let's trust experience and explanation and not excuses. Vote for me for treasurer. The buck will stop with me. I humbly ask for your support and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kareem. Brandon, for your closing statement.
So I believe the treasurer should have had extensive experience with the Young Lawyers Division, and I just want to recap some of my experience with the ABA-YLD. I've been on council for several years as a district representative and have been involved with the affiliate assistance team. I also have been very involved as a vice director of the public service team. I plan public service outreaches. As I mentioned earlier, I organized one of the most viewed at the time Facebook Live videos, and I'll help plan a unique CLE for the Home Safe Home Initiative, in which I earned a Star of the Quarter award. And as some of you may know, I was involved in a year-long effort to change the definition of what's considered a young lawyer by expanding the definition of a young lawyer, which made ABA history. And in addition, I think it's important for someone involved with the ABA to have experience outside of the Young Lawyers Division, and I've been involved with the Standing Committee on Gun Violence and the Legal Opportunity Scholarship Committee. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm one of the few young lawyers who have served as an officer or an executive committee member of 3 different state Young Lawyers Divisions in New Jersey, New York, and Florida. And as preparing me to become treasurer, I will be serving as the treasurer of the New York State Bar Young Lawyers section starting next month, and I will also be the treasurer of the Florida Bar's out-of-state division. I believe they have great experience and background to serve as the ABA-YLD treasurer. Now, as treasurer of the ABA-YLD, I'd like to expand the role, and as I mentioned earlier, I'd like the treasurer to be more visible within the ABA-YLD. And one of those things is by, as we discussed earlier, bringing back and having a more robust finance board. And as I talked about earlier, I think we should be focusing our efforts on securing new sponsors, which is especially important as we move into the virtual spring conference and the annual meeting. And as I said earlier, I'd look forward to hearing from more of you in our conversations in the next few weeks about how you think the treasurer can have a better impact on your role within the division. And just to recap, I believe my leadership roles within the ABA-YLD and 3 state bar associations makes me a great candidate to be the ABA-YLD treasurer. And I humbly ask for your support. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our 2 treasurer candidates. We appreciate your time. If you can go ahead and video, thank you. All right, thank you. Now we will go ahead and bring our 2 candidates for YLD clerk, Abre Conner and Peter Handy. If they can then now bring their video up. Perfect. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So, you know the rules at this point. With the individual who will win the election, they will serve a 2-term as clerk and as speaker. We will start with Abre, who won the coin toss. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Abre, you can go first.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Thanks everyone for being here. We're living in unprecedented times, but one thing that we've seen is that prepared leaders have been the ones to step up, think creatively, and ensure that we can move towards a future that involves the voices of those who they serve. I'm Abre Conner. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an attorney at the ACLU and a lecturer at UC Davis. And I am thrilled to be in this race for ABA-YLD clerk. My theme, Advocates for Today to Build a Better Tomorrow, really encompasses where we are now. In uncertain times, it is important for someone who has experience to navigate all the unknowns and strategize for a better tomorrow. I started my YLD leadership path nearly 5 years ago, and I've attended every single assembly since then. I've served as parliamentarian for the YLD Assembly, and I currently serve as Assembly Assistant. My platform is 3-pronged. 1, increase Assembly access. 2, increase perspective and diversity of voices. And 3, increase delegate certification. What does that mean to you? Right now, it's important that we're increasing access to Assembly. As we see, Assembly may be a virtual setting for quite a bit of time. We need to make sure that our platforms meet lawyers where they are. This includes considerations for using internet-based platforms as a primary means of communication. We must evaluate what's working and what's not. People typically caucus within their state during assembly. I've thought through some possibilities to make sure that we don't lose that either. As many of you may have heard in the past, fully utilizing social media and online presence is key to my platform as well. And so increasing perspective and diversity of voices, we also have to evaluate comfort levels. We have to engage people where they are, and thinking about our potential changes in the assembly format, that has to be part of the consideration. I've been working with cities and school districts across the state of California to ensure that their COVID board meetings are compliant with those things, ensuring that people are comfortable. And I have some ideas to make sure that we are encouraging and not discouraging online participation, regardless of if we meet in person. Delegate certification may look different over the next couple of years, but I believe that we can still increase certification through our networks and incentives. As a district representative, I've talked with affiliates regarding how YLD can better include them. And over the last 9 months, I've talked with hundreds of young lawyers regarding ABA concerns. As a candidate for your policy body, I've been doing my homework with your help, and I look forward to discussing my plans even further.
Thank you, Abre. Peter, you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Jamie. As you heard, my name is Peter Handy, and I'm speaking to you this evening because I am running for YLD Clerk. If you're like me, you have been spending a lot more time at home, and maybe spending a little more than that time in front of a TV. I'm sure that all of you are also hearing the same phrases over and over again. Apparently, we are all living in these uncertain times. But I've never been more certain about a lot of things. I'm certain that our calling is an essential one, as attorneys and as active YLD members. We're all trying to navigate new court rules, schedules, comply with our state's workplace requirements, provide the advice and representation to our clients that they desperately need. I'm certain that it is during these kind of uncertain times that the rule of law must remain the essential bedrock of American life, and it is our charge to uphold it. Wherever we're assembled, whether in person or by Zoom meeting or by Life-Size or by Microsoft Teams, we must continue to work together to maintain the credibility and dignity of this body and of the profession, to voice our concerns and ideas and discuss them in a collegial and professional forum. As a Deputy Attorney General for the state of Nevada, I advise state boards, agencies, and even courts, represent them in litigation, and ensure and enforce statutory and regulatory compliance. I also effectively serve as a professional parliamentarian. I sit as counsel to a number of boards, made up of various stakeholders from industry, from government, and from nonprofits, and which are regulated by our state's open meeting law, in which capacity I sit as both a legal advisor to the board and as a parliamentarian. In Nevada, the open meeting laws void any action taken by a board that fails to comply with the law, so my advice can have substantial consequences. As clerk, I'll bring that experience to the assembly floor to develop a collegial, professional, and productive environment. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we will move on to the questions, and we will start with Abre. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions. Abre, and this is a question from the audience. Participation by several districts is down year over year. What actions do you intend to take to encourage full delegations and get those YLD members who are not present at Assembly an opportunity to weigh in on resolutions debated at Assembly?
That's a great question, and it's come up during many of the conversations that I've had with young lawyers over the last 9 months. One of the suggestions that I've thrown out to young lawyers and have gotten some good feedback about is ensuring that we're using social media platforms prior to our assembly, actual assembly. That way, individuals can potentially weigh in, kind of think about what it is that the resolution is that is going to be coming to the body, and potentially start to have those kinds of conversations. So I think that that's one thing, is using social media, seeing if we can have short videos where individuals are talking about their resolution. And then also, one of the things that I've always mentioned is incentives. I think that we should continue having incentives, but really ensuring that everyone across the country is able to engage with encouraging their friends to be a part of Assembly.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I think a large part of it is getting in contact with those districts and bringing them to the table on a platform they can actually engage on. So if you're out in the middle of Idaho, it might be cost prohibitive to fly to Chicago or to Florida or wherever to come to Assembly. I think by utilizing the technology we have, we can bring more people from more rural areas, from more rural states, or that have those kind of financial or other difficulties in getting to an assembly, to really bring them in and make their voice heard in a way that they might not have been able to be heard before just because of the financial disconnect. I think it's also important to really reach out to them and let them know like their input is important to us, that we need them to tell us what their needs are, and we need to try and meet those and give them that kind of platform in front of the entire assembly, not just in their home states or counties.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stick with you, Peter. So how will the division keep young lawyers engaged virtually, just keep them virtually involved when it moves back to the physical meetings?
And I think we effectively do the same way we're doing it right now, right? There's no reason the technology already exists. We can incorporate assembly that's being run on Zoom or some other media platform. People can sign in. It's not extremely difficult. Sarah's doing a great job today of keeping us all in line. I think that this is a very valid method of bringing people to the table, to be able to give them their time to speak, to be able to regulate people on the floor. And I think that this really is going to be how we continue to keep members engaged that are from, like I said, some of those rural areas, or from state bars that won't finance a lot of people to go to assemblies. I'm from a small bar, as it were. I'm the chair-elect for the Nevada bar, and I think it's a very large portion of our budget to send anybody to assembly. And we always are looking at ways to cut our budget expenditures because we get an allotment from the state bar, and that's kind of what we get for the year. So I think we need to really bring in those other states and those other underrepresented places by making this happen.
Thank you. Abre, how will the division keep young lawyers engaged virtually, right, when it moves back to the physical meetings?
Yeah, that's such a great question. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is the new podcast idea. I think that is such a great idea to ensure that there's kind of consistent communication with young lawyers. I also, as a part of being in Northern California, I've lived in Fresno and in Bakersfield, which are rural parts of the state, and now I'm living in Sacramento. And one thing for sure is that individuals definitely seem to like podcasts and seem to utilize those kinds of mechanisms to ensure that they are getting information. We have to really think outside of the box of our traditional internet-based platforms as well. There's TikTok, there's Instagram Live, there's Facebook Live, there's Twitter, and how can we also ensure that we're utilizing those? Maybe we can create a video using TikTok with some of the ABA, YLD rules for how to engage in assembly as well. And so I look forward to thinking with you all about how we can use some of those platforms as well.
Thank you. Abre, I'm gonna go ahead and stick with you for the next question. And this is from the audience, can you highlight your experience with Robert's Rule of Order?
Yes, so for the last, it's been 13 years now almost, I've been engaged in Robert's Rules of Order very, very deeply. Back in 2007, I became a member of my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, where we use Robert's Rules of Order, and we use that for every single meeting. And so even before I started my path to law school, I was very deeply engaged in understanding Robert's Rules of Order. In addition to that, I've served in various bar positions and affiliates here in California. I've served in state and national leadership positions within my sorority, and then also within the National Bar Association, I've held positions where we also use Robert's Rules of Order. So I'm very familiar with it, and then also as parliamentarian for this body within the YLD Assembly, I had to become very, very familiar with how to incorporate Robert's Rules along with our standing rules as well.
Thank you. Peter, do you have any?
My experience begins similarly. In 2006, I was initiated into the Kappa Sigma fraternity. Before that, in 2004, I became a member of the Free and Accepted Masons. Meetings are almost always conducted by Robert's Rules of Order and Greek organizations, with some caveats, of course. I rose through the ranks to become president of my fraternity in 2010. I ran meetings under Robert's Rules of Order. Since then, I've went to law school. That dropped off a little bit there, I suppose. But as soon as I started the practice of law, I was doing a lot of corporate formations and corporate management work. And a lot of that is incorporating meeting minutes, ensuring that the boards are compliant with Robert's Rules of Order. Since then, again, I've been on the my state Nevada Young Lawyers section board since 2014. 2015, I think, is when I actually officially started. And we work along with Robert's Rules of Order. Most of our meetings are telephonic, so I'm not unfamiliar with doing it by distance means or technological means. In some cases, it makes it a lot easier to ensure that people are getting the time they need.
Thank you. Now, this is a question from the audience. Peter, do you have any House of Delegates experience?
No, I do not.
Okay. And Abre, do you have any House of Delegates experience?
I've interacted with folks from the House of Delegates. I also attended the last House of Delegates meeting, which was a great opportunity to really see how the resolutions that were passed in our assembly actually moved forward to the House of Delegates. I also attended the chat that the House of Delegates had to get YLD input for how we can better be engaged with that process. And so being a part of those conversations, actually going to a House of Delegates meeting was very helpful to really kind of pull all those things together. I've had conversations with folks who are also a part of the House of Delegates as well.
Thank you. Abre, this is a question from the audience. Please describe your experience with either the resolutions team, ABA YLD Assembly, and or proposing, drafting, or presenting resolutions.
Yeah, I'm currently a member of the resolutions team. This is my second time actually being a member of the resolutions team. I've been ABA YLD parliamentarian, which in that role I had to have a very good understanding of how YLD Assembly worked very closely with the speaker in that role, and now I am YLD Assembly Assistant. And in that role, I actually kind of get to look at all the resolutions, make sure that the meeting is moving forward in a way that logistically kind of makes sense for everyone who's kind of watching the final product. It also ensures, it's also about understanding how resolutions need to be presented to the body. In addition to that, I have experience drafting resolutions. I am so happy to be a part of the team and a co-author for the Crown Act resolution that we just came through council recently. And so that is something that just very recently I've been a part of drafting.
Thank you. Peter, please describe your experience with the resolution team, the the ABA YLD Assembly, and proposing, drafting, or presenting resolutions?
Yeah, I've only been a member of the resolutions team for the past bar year. It's been a great experience. I think it's very interesting to kind of see the meat grinder from the inside. It's been interesting with the to kind of experience and observe the process and the timelines that are imposed. It's interesting how the communications had between drafters and the resolutions team. With Assembly, I've been a district representative for the last year and a half, and before that, I was at the last couple of Assembly meetings debating on the floor with other members and voting on these resolutions. It strikes me always with the amount of work and effort and detail that goes into the drafting of resolutions. It's very impressive. The drafters do a lot of work, and I think we hold them to a high standard, and it comes out as a great product almost every time. And I think that's something that doesn't really need to be worked on as far as how the product is produced, so much as it is getting more of the product into production.
Thank you. Now, Peter, what will you do to drive innovation in the governance process?
I'm not a fan of the status quo being the status quo generally, so governance needs to constantly be changing. And I'm definitely a voice behind why and how things should be changing. I think governance needs to be more, I don't want to say transparent because a lot of the meetings are open, but certainly accessible. Because if you're like, it's your first time at an ABA meeting and you see all these things on the walls and there are things everywhere, but there are a lot of closed doors for meetings. There's a lot of, well, we heard council pass this out of council and now you're going to vote on the floor today. And, maybe for your first meeting, you're a delegate, you're from Nevada, and you're like, I have no idea what that means. I think it's important that we start moving that forward to where we can get just the line assembly person to understand what's actually happening, what their rights and the ability to see what's happening are, and so they can make their voice heard, so they can actually analyze what's going on assembly-wide. I don't think this is just a small governance change. It's something that needs to shift so that we can all really get more involved with the membership.
Abre, what will you do to drive innovation in the governance process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really think that goes to kind of my second prong of increasing perspective and diversity in voices. That's something I feel is very, very important to ensuring that Assembly really represents all of us. So one of the things that I've already been doing is having conversations with young lawyers, asking them, how can we actually increase that perspective? How can we increase diversity of voices? And I think that pulling together the conversations that I've had with young lawyers over the last 9 months and continuing to have those conversations is key. As we can continue to make sure that our Assembly is as accessible to everyone, and think about folks who potentially may have disabilities, and are we really ensuring that we have diversity and perspectives and voices? Are there language barriers that we need to consider? And so that's one of the things I definitely think is important as we think about Assembly moving forward.
Thank you. Now, candidates, you will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we will start with Abre.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity to talk with you all about my platform, a little bit about me. And as you've heard, I've thought a lot about what the new normal is going to be like for YLD Assembly, but I haven't done that alone. Prior to the pandemic, I asked many of you, what can we do to make things better? We will have to consider many new possibilities to make sure that whoever is elected to YLD Clerk can help to meet your needs, and hopefully that's me. Many of my platform points, such as live streaming, creating videos, and social media content, are critical to what our new normal will look like. As someone who has studied this position closely, I am prepared to do more. We must be utilizing some of these social media platforms that I mentioned before: Instagram Live, TikTok, Hangouts, Zoom. Can we And we can use this as a possibility to have some fun videos that can discuss the YLD assembly rules as well. I love the new podcast idea, and I hope that that can be a creative tool for YLD assembly content as well. As a civil rights lawyer, the one thing that I have learned is to make sure that I create a safe and inclusive environment for my clients and for the communities I serve. I see my YLD family as a community that I hope to continue to serve as your next YLD clerk. And feel free to reach out to me at any point. Most of you have my information, acforYLD.com. That is my platform that you can reach me online, and you can also feel free to reach me on social media as well. Thank you.
Peter, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
To paraphrase a president, why do we choose to go to the moon? Why does San Jose State University choose to play Texas? Go Spartans. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. In the past, we have had issues with division and derision, arising to an atmosphere of otherism and unacceptable unprofessional behavior in the assembly. We have a duty to engage with each other and to debate the hard issues, personal issues, and emerging issues. At some point, the United States was dreamed of as being a melting pot. It's been suggested more recently that we are a stew of many parts, but of a common broth. I think the analogy is apt for the YLD. Our broth is the study and practice of the law. Together, we face a lot of the same problems and experience a lot of the same joys. And it's those things that bind us together and upon which the foundations of our division are laid. We need to return to that broth and engage with each other as colleagues with shared interests and goals, as well as diverse, unique individuals. We need to utilize our differences in perspective and experiences and better each other and the provision utilizing those. It will be hard to change the culture, but it has to start somewhere. As clerk, you will be able to depend on me to address and resolve issues among assembly members, to foster true collegial debate, to improve transparency and access to the members at large, and to improve the ability of people who don't normally engage with the division to engage in the division, to engage in assembly, to engage with the people who are determining to not a small extent how their practice might change, will change in the future. I just want to thank you all for your time and consideration. I hope to see you all again at virtual annual, maybe an at-home happy hour, in kitchen dine-arounds. We need to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. As I indicated earlier, I will, as time permits, and we have 5 minutes. So if we can go ahead and thank you for the clerk candidates. I appreciate you being here. If we can go ahead and take your video off, I'm going to bring back our secretary candidates. Thank you. Please go ahead and the 2 candidates for secretary. We have 1 question. Okay. Historically, and this is a question from the audience. Historically, YLD's partnership with FEMA, the disaster relief, is really related to weather, natural disasters, right? Now, the current COVID-19 pandemic it's a new type of natural disaster we've never seen before. Young lawyers have been affected by this change at an unprecedented rate. How would you broaden the role of the director, of the Disaster Legal Services Director, to ensure that the YLD is prepared to address the needs of young lawyers and their communities in the face of new types of disasters? Joe, you can go first.
Thanks for the question, Jamie, and thanks to whoever submitted it. Linda Anderson-Stanley is doing a bang-up job this year as DLS director, and she deserves more shout-outs than my 1 minute allows me. But like Jamie alluded to, we only deploy DLS when a national disaster has been declared. So what I don't think folks have seen, but I've had the opportunity as affiliates director, working so closely with Linda as DLS director, I've seen her deploy resources to all of our DRs on how they can communicate with the affiliates on best practices for working with legal services providers on the ground for folks that are affected by COVID-19 and the current pandemic that we're all involved in. Our funding for DRs largely comes from FEMA, and so we're dependent on our relationship there. We also need to make sure that we're making a stronger approach. I think Linda has done a great job in starting that conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they transition into next year and step up when more issues arise.
Thank you, Joe. Jerome?
So again, thank you to who asked that question. It's particularly important in a time like right now. Again, I need to echo all the incredible kudos that Linda deserves and the entire DLS team. I myself am presently a district representative for District 20 in the state of Michigan. I think no one could have imagined stepping into their roles that it wasn't just going to be just one area that unfortunately suffers some type of natural disaster, but that we have a worldwide, not just nationwide pandemic. I think by expanding the role, there is some limitation that this is beyond that. Even we saw the Federal CARES Act, which I spent actually a ton of time analyzing by nature of my work. Unfortunately, even when those FEMA resources are allocated, they have to be allocated for things like DLS. So they got allocated, but they still weren't able to be used. But shouts to many states like Michigan and others that have done their own things, such as hotlines and the like, to be able to get lawyers involved. But I think we can learn from this pandemic and find ways to expand the role that we can be more nimble in case we ever encounter something like this or similar.
Thank you. Now, as I indicated earlier, YLD elections will be held virtually during the ABA annual meeting. All the candidates, can you please put up your video so the attendees can see your face? Thank you. Additional information regarding the elections will be forthcoming. I encourage you to reach out to all the candidates with any questions that you may have. Finally, thank you to all the candidates who participate in the forum and for those that attended. We really appreciate it. This attendance, logging in today, staying on with us, really shows your dedication to the division. With that being said, enjoy the rest of your evening, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you, and we will see you virtually next month. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Stay
night.
well, be blessed.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jamie.